My father didn't even clear his throat before doing it. He just pushed a polished folder across the table and said my sister's name like it was a promise. Lina had been home for 7 days. I'd carried my parents for 10 years. The celebration dinner was supposed to feel warm. Golden pendant lights glowed over the long walnut table. The crystal glasses caught the brightness like tiny chandeliers, and the air smelled faintly of rosemary and expensive expectations. Everyone dressed up. Not for me, of course, but for the image of a perfect family evening. My mother had curated the ambience down to the linen napkins. My father rehearsed the speech he'd been dying to deliver. Even Lina, still smelling like airport perfume and fresh opportunity, wore a smile she didn't earn. I sat through the toasts, the clinking glasses, the exaggerated compliments, the stories about our family's legacy. My father's eyes sparkled the way they never did for me, not even after a decade of holding up the business, the bills, and the emergencies they pretended never happened. And then it happened. My father slid the polished leather folder to the center of the table and announced, voice steady and proud, that Lina would be leading the family business. 7 days home, and suddenly she was the heir to everything I'd kept alive. The table erupted in applause. I didn't clap. Instead, I stood. The room quieted instantly, as if the air itself knew something had shifted. I reached into my bag and placed 3 objects on the table. First, the ring of keys. They hit the wood with a sharp metallic clink that didn't belong in a celebration. Second, the power of attorney document. Signed, notarized, irrefutable. Third, the red envelope. The color bled under the warm lighting, bright and accusing. Lina was the first to touch it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid out the papers. She skimmed the first page, her smile collapsing. Her eyes darted faster, reading, rereading, realizing, her breath caught. What is this? Her voice cracked, high and thinned. My father reached across the table, snatching the documents from her. His face drained of color as he took in each line. Every transfer, every signature, every deadline. The structure he'd depended on. The systems I built. The operations I quietly controlled. All moved. All gone. All legal. Behind him a chair shifted. Mr. Hayes, the family's attorney, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up. His presence alone was confirmation. My mother's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the china. My father, still staring at the pages, whispered, "Cara, what did you do?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You have exactly what you valued," I said calmly. "Appearance without structure." The room froze. Mid-breath, mid-thought, mid-collapse. But to understand how we got here, you need to know what came before. You need to see the hallways I grew up in. I grew up in hallways that smelled like antiseptic and lavender, their lights humming softly overhead. That smell is burned into my memory. The blend of disinfectant and cheap lavender diffusers my mother bought in bulk. When other kids remembered playgrounds or treehouses, I remembered polished floors, wheeled beds, and the echo of my own footsteps chasing after my father as he walked ahead without looking back. He'd stride through the facility like a general, barking instructions, checking charts, shaking hands. I was the shadow behind him, barely 10 years old, pushing wheelchairs that were too big for me, gripping the cold metal with small hands that blistered. Meanwhile, Lina floated. She didn't walk, she glided. Pretty dresses, perfect curls, the kind of laughter that snagged attention like gravity. Nurses doted on her. Visitors smiled. My mother would kneel down to straighten Lina's collar, her voice softened to honey, while I stood to the side holding someone's abandoned clipboard, waiting to be useful. The difference was everywhere. Take our birthdays. Lina's 9th. Sparklers, a rented hall, a cake taller than she was, and a photographer who followed her like a celebrity in training. My 9th. A sheet cake from the cafeteria, squeezed between my father's meetings. "You don't mind, right?" he said. "You're independent." Independent, his favorite word. A compliment that was really a dismissal. Code for we don't need to support her. Everything Lina touched came with investment. Tutors for math. Summer camps for leadership. Ballet classes. A college fund that grew like a well-watered plant. Everything I touched turned into responsibility, BY16, while Lina posted photos from workshops and camps designed to unlock her potential. I was working evening shifts in the facility, cleaning up spills, filling out intake forms, covering for absent staff. My father proudly told people I was dedicated, but he never questioned why a 16-year-old needed to work at all. And the photos told their own story. Family events where Lina was centered, glowing, lit like the protagonist. I was always half-cut at the edge of the frame, carrying folders, holding coats, wiping down counters in the background. My mother's excuse was always the same. You were just so helpful, sweetheart. Helpful, useful, invisible. This was the rhythm of our childhood. Lina received the attention, the praise, the resources. I received the tasks, the obligations, the unspoken expectation that I would keep everything functioning so Lina could shine. And when I succeeded, when I nailed a test or organized an event or solved a crisis at the facility, they barely reacted. Cara can handle it, they'd say, as if competence was the same as being cared for. By the time I reached adulthood, the lesson was carved into me like a permanent engraving. My value wasn't in being seen. It was in being used. I learned early that wanting anything made me inconvenient. So I stopped wanting. And that's when I became truly useful. Stay with me. This gets deeper. By the time I reached adulthood, the pattern had hardened into something that looked like destiny. Lina left for the city with a suitcase full of ambition and a smile that promised she'd conquer the world. Creative media, she said. Art, film, influence. The kind of lofty pursuits that made her parents beam with pride. Every phone call she made home was filled with updates on auditions, exhibitions, collaborations. Every time she asked for money, they sent it without hesitation, as if the envelope itself carried her right to success. Meanwhile, I stayed. The business that had always leaned on me now demanded all of me. The shifts were longer, the responsibilities heavier. Father fell ill first, his health unraveling like a poorly written script. Mother's decline followed soon after, subtle at first, then undeniable. Staff quit one by one, leaving gaps I filled without complaint. Regulations tightened, inspections became frequent, and the weight of licenses, compliance, and payroll fell squarely on my shoulders. IT was in the dead of night, sitting on a vinyl hospital chair with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, that I signed the power of attorney. 2 a.m. The quiet hum of the ventilation was the only sound keeping me company. Every line on the document was a tether, every signature a confirmation. You're good with the serious things, my father said once, handing me a file. Not a compliment. Confirmation. A recognition of what I already knew. They would never rely on anyone else. The reflection in the glass doors of the office building caught me often. Someone in her 20s shouldn't look so worn, so calculated, so vigilant. Yet there I was, tracking medications, auditing staffing schedules, ensuring compliance with regulations that changed monthly, filling drawers with pills in the morning, and balancing the same spreadsheets by night. I was present in every crisis, every emergency, every misstep, yet absent from recognition, applause, or acknowledgement. I became the scaffolding of the family. Lina was the face, bright, untouchable, public-facing. I held the structure together in silence, invisible yet indispensable. My phone became an extension of my hand, my mind a ledger of emergencies and contingencies. By day, I walked the hallways of the facility like I had for years. By night, I carried spreadsheets, schedules, and POAs across a city that didn't sleep. Every successful resolution, every compliance approval, every employee retention became another thread in the web I spun to keep the family afloat. And still, at every holiday, every gathering, every photo taken for memory's sake, I was the half-cut figure in the background, smiling when necessary, silent when required, competent always, rewarded never. And then the realization came. Not a sudden flash, but a slow, almost imperceptible truth. Lina wasn't the one keeping anything together. She didn't have to. I was the scaffolding. Invisible, uncelebrated, carrying the weight while everyone else enjoyed the view. I remember thinking even then that this was my place. Not chosen, assigned. But assignment isn't the same as acceptance. And I was learning the difference. Keep watching. The shift came quietly. The way storms crawl in before anyone notices the sky has changed. First it was subtle. Emails that once landed in my inbox now arrived without my name on the CC line. Meeting invites I'd always received automatically no longer included me. When I asked the nurse why I wasn't scheduled to present the operational report at the staff meeting, she glanced at me, unsure. "They didn't mention you," she said softly, as if she were apologizing for my own erasure. Standing alone in the supply room, my phone vibrated. A new photo had been shared on the family group chat. Lina, standing in front of the facility, perfectly lit, perfectly poised. The caption read, "Future Leadership." My thumb hovered over the image, the screen glowing against the cold white walls. My name wasn't mentioned. My work wasn't visible. Only her. Days later, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. Another celebration. Another toast to the family legacy. But this time, I wasn't the one ensuring the legacy held. I was the shadow in the margins. That evening, I walked into my parents' kitchen. The smell of roasted peppers curled lazily around the room. Lina and my father were deep in discussion, sketching ideas on notepads, talking about vision ideas for the next decade. I lingered at the doorway, quiet, listening. "You've done enough heavy lifting," my father said, turning slightly toward me. "Let Lina take on bigger responsibilities." My mother reached out, brushing her hand across my wrist. Not gentle, not dismissive, but confirming. "You're good with the behind-the-scenes things," she said. The words weren't praise. They weren't gratitude. They were a decree. Later, I found Lina's folder. I flipped through the papers, seeing numbers that didn't add up, proposals that were impossible, decisions marked only with my parents' initials. Chaos masquerading as strategy. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even frown. I just smiled. Not the small, polite smile of a compliant daughter. This was a quiet, deliberate smile. One that acknowledged what had been happening for years and recognized the clarity it brought. I understood that if I did nothing, the foundation I had built would crumble, or be handed to someone unprepared to hold it. But if I acted carefully, deliberately, I could ensure the outcome no one else imagined. For the first time in years, I felt the calm before the storm. Not fear, not anger, not desperation. Control. Precision. Possibility. I sat down, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. My breath steadied, thin but controlled. I looked at the papers again and felt something inside me settle. Not break. Settle. I didn't react that night. I didn't argue or correct the numbers. I simply closed the folder and walked upstairs. Each step felt steady, almost weightless, like I was leaving gravity behind. The house was quiet when I reached my room. I opened a blank document on my laptop, the screen glowing like a promise. For hours I typed not sentences but timelines. Bullet points, crisp and precise, condensing 10 years of crises, emergencies, and quiet heroism into a single, unbroken chain. Every regulatory hurdle, every staffing emergency, every financial discrepancy. Every moment I'd held the family and business together without recognition. Lists of licenses, compliance standards, partnerships, vendors, contractors, funding cycles. My fingers moved as if they remembered every detail better than my mind did. The history of my work, distilled into a blueprint that would become the backbone of the future. The next morning I drove early to Dr. Hale's office. The scent of cedar shelves and old books filled the room as I entered. "You don't need revenge," he said, gesturing to a stack of files. "You need structure." His words weren't consolation. They were confirmation. Mess. Rowan arrived shortly after, leather portfolio in hand, decades of calm radiating around her. "Without the licenses, the facilities are buildings, nothing more," she said, her eyes scanning the documents I carried. It wasn't just legal advice. It was the framework I needed to ensure the work I'd done couldn't be undone by appearances or whims. We created the Harbor Bridge Foundation, Not to own, not to control, but to safeguard. Intellectual property, operational procedures, protocols, all transferred under my authority as POA. Every move executed with the precision I had used for years to dispense medication or reconcile audits. Every signature, every initial, every transfer methodically documented. When my parents signed what they thought was routine administrative cleanup, they barely glanced at the fine print. They didn't notice the clauses that stripped them of operational authority, the frameworks that left the buildings as empty shells without structure. Recognition only. Their names on paper, nothing else. No ownership, no control. Just the illusion of continuity. The work was exhaustive, meticulous, relentless. Every hour felt like a stitch in a tapestry only I could see. By mid-afternoon, all transfers were complete. Files archived. Compliance verified. Protocols in place. The Harbor Bridge Foundation existed as a shield, a structure they couldn't remove, no matter how loudly they protested. And then I returned to operations as if nothing had changed. I checked schedules, ensured medication protocols were followed, updated staff rosters. My presence was seamless, unremarkable. The system hummed, perfectly intact, entirely invisible to the very people who had underestimated me. When the work was done, I returned to operations as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The system now had a backbone they couldn't remove. And they had no idea. The celebration was coming. Let me take you back to that moment. The envelope opening. The truth unfolding. Lina's fingers trembled as she lifted the red envelope fully this time. She unfolded the papers carefully, almost reverently, but the anticipation in her eyes shifted quickly into disbelief. Page after page detailed protocols, operational frameworks, and the creation of the Harbor Bridge Foundation. Her breath hitched. "You're joking," she whispered, the chair screeching backward against the polished floor. She scanned the lines again, searching for a mistake, a loophole, something. Anything that might make it all a misunderstanding. My father's hands shook as he reached for the documents, fingers trembling over terms he thought he understood. "What did you do?" His voice cracked, the color draining from his face, betraying the depth of his shock. My mother's hand hovered over the papers, frozen. "This says we don't own any of this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just buildings." From the corner Mr. Hayes rose, calm, precise. "Everything in that packet is accurate. With your signatures. You both approved the documents. Every clause, every transfer, every contingency." His tone was polite, professional, but unyielding. The law had spoken, and there was no room for reinterpretation. Lina turned to me, confusion and panic warring across her face. "So, what did they just give me?" I said nothing immediately. The room held its collective breath. Mr. Hayes answered instead. "Two aging properties. And the debt tied to them. Certification of operation is contingent on meeting care standards. If safety protocols lapse, Harbor can revoke the license within 60 days. Lina sank back into her chair, disbelief softening into humiliation. "I thought I was taking over something real," she muttered. "You were," I said calmly, almost softly. "The system, the responsibility, the work. You just never saw it." Their shock was complete. Years of assumed power, years of entitlement, were stripped in moments. The structures they thought they controlled were now frameworks I had built, invisible to them until the moment it mattered. I stepped back from the table, letting the weight of my silence fill the space. No argument, no raised voice, no rush to explain further. They had all the documents, all the authority, and all the consequences. Lina's eyes followed me, wide and incredulous. My parents' faces were pale, guilt and disbelief warring in their features. The celebration, the appearances, the illusion of inheritance. It was gone. I closed the space between us, walking calmly toward the doorway, each step measured, deliberate. Behind me, the room was a silent storm. Mr. Hayes returned to his chair, professional and unshaken. The system I had built, the backbone I had maintained for over a decade, would now speak for itself. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stepped back from the table. The system would speak from here. And it did. I didn't sleep that night. Not from guilt. There was nothing to feel guilty about. But because the house felt strangely quiet without the weight of expectation pressing against the walls. The phone stayed dark. No alerts, no late calls. No reminders demanding I fix someone else's mess. The silence felt unfamiliar, like stepping into a room I hadn't realized existed. Relief pressed against me in waves, not shame, not fear. Just freedom. Emails from banks, staff resignations, compliance notices, they all went to them now. To my parents. Lina. Every problem, every missed signature, every neglected protocol now bounced back to the people who had been chasing illusions for years. I drove to Harbor Bridge Center before sunrise. The amber light spilled across the river, softening the buildings, the water, the world itself. Volunteers were setting up, tuning the piano, preparing for another day. Life continued without my intervention, and it was perfect in its normalcy and my small office. Morning light softened the edges of everything. I set down my keys, exhaled slowly, and finally let myself feel it. Calm. Control. Ownership of only what belonged to me. I saw my parents in the Medicaid waiting room later, hands clasped, staring straight ahead. I didn't pause. There was nothing left for me to fix through the windows. I caught a glimpse of Lina pushing a wheelchair. Her movements careful now, quieter, different without the spotlight. She was learning, slowly, on her own. Some stories end with triumph, others with revenge. Mine ended differently. Mine ended with space. Clean, quiet, earned. For the first time I wasn't carrying anything that wasn't mine. Families fracture loudly, but boundaries settle like dust. Soft, inevitable, impossible to sweep away once you finally stop pretending you're the one holding everything up. Freedom didn't come from winning. It came from stepping aside without looking back. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the silence that follows is the only truth that ever mattered. If this story stayed with you, stay close. More are coming.